Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, has just admitted that we're currently in the middle of a housing crisis. Some pretty strong language. And he admitted this at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference that they hold. This is essentially where mayors and different councillors from towns and cities all across Canada come together to hear how they're going to be able to work with the federal government as well as potential future federal governments from opposition parties, how they're going to be able to work with them to tackle this housing crisis. And at this conference, Trudeau reveals the 4 things that he's already started to do and will continue to implement in the future that he hopes to use to tackle this problem. And also Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, essentially calls out Trudeau saying, hey, all of his announcements, they're pretty much BS, they're not going to do anything. So in today's video, we're going to go over what these 4 different ideas that Trudeau has are, some potential problems with them, what Jagmeet Singh is suggesting we do, some problems with that, along with my thoughts about what's really going to make the biggest difference if we're able to implement some change here. But before we do, I've had a couple people message me asking for this, so I've decided to briefly extend the coupon code INVEST for 45% off the Canada Money Mastery program. The link is down there in the description. Tons of content in there on Canadian personal finance, as well as a section on house hacking, one of the best ways to save up for a down payment, and then once you buy a house, actually be able to make a little bit of money on it while you're living there. So check that out and see if the program's a good fit for you. Just going to extend that for a couple more days here. So we're going to start with exactly what Trudeau's planning on doing here and what he's already doing to tackle this housing issue. All of those different 4 points. I'm going to play the whole clip here, and then once that clip's finished, we're sort of going to go through it point by point to talk about, hey, how there might be some problems here that you might find frustrating, especially once I show you the information that sort of pertains to what he's announcing here. Let's listen to that clip, and then I'll talk to you afterwards.
In too many places, owning a home is too far out of reach. After all, how's a young family somewhere like Vancouver supposed to put away enough money when regular houses cost upward of $1 million? And in Canada's largest city, it now takes almost 280 months for an average family to save for a down payment. Look, owning a home is a big investment, so it makes sense to rent or stay with family while working towards a down payment. But 23 years to save for a house? That's just not reasonable. Young people aren't facing a housing problem. They're facing a housing crisis. We've got a generation of Canadians who are starting their lives, maybe hoping to start a family, without the same opportunity as their parents or grandparents to get a first home and build equity and their future. Things need to change. And that's what our government is focused on. Now, you know better than anyone that there's no silver bullet for the housing crisis. That's why over the past 5 years, we've come at this from every angle. We created the National Housing Strategy, which has meant more than 1 million people now have an affordable place to live. We launched the new Rapid Housing Initiative, something I know many of you advocated for, to make sure Canadians have a safe place to stay during and beyond this pandemic. At the same time, we've made it easier for young people to get into the housing market with the first-time homebuyer incentive. And just this spring, we announced a tax on vacant or underused homes held by foreign owners. After all, a home is a place to live, not a place to park foreign wealth.
This is the most we've heard Justin Trudeau talk about housing in quite a long time, and he essentially comes out with this really strong language saying, hey, young people and people who are looking to get into their first homes, well, it's not just a problem, it's a crisis now at this point. So some strong language here, but are these programs actually going to back up anything? Let's start with the first one. That's the National Housing Strategy that he brings up. This is one of the largest programs and largest or highest financed programs by the federal government, essentially dedicating $70 billion over the next 10 years for certain strategic housing goals. But what those goals are right now might have you a little bit confused. Let's switch over to this website. This is put together by the CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Company, I believe, or Commission. And that is essentially the organization that's implementing this national housing strategy. But when we get into the details of what this program actually looks like, we start to see that, hey, this isn't actually going to do much in terms of reducing house prices or making it more affordable for Canadians to own a home. No, it seems like everything here is more targeted at the rental side of things. And I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see it a little bit more clearly, but you'll see that every single point is sort of leaning towards helping the rental supply, but not really the housing supply. They're going to be creating new affordable housing shelters, and also construction financing for rental projects, right? Building rental apartment buildings. All of these sort of these measures and these programs that are being brought in, well, it's really all focused around creating new rental housing. And I certainly think that that's a good idea, right? We need to have more rental housing that's more affordable, increase that supply so that Canadians who are even struggling to rent a place right now are able to do so easily. And we see the exact same thing here when we take a look at Trudeau's second point, the fact that they're bringing in this rapid housing initiative. Let me show you what I found out here. For this rapid housing initiative, the purpose of the funding is only for new construction or modular rental projects, right? So essentially they want to make or Lego or like sort of modular built off-site homes that can sort of stack up to make more rental units, right? So again, it's an emphasis on rentals, not actually new construction or incentivizing new construction for Canadians who want to buy and own their home here. It also includes conversions and rehabilitations, sort of switching non-residential buildings into affordable housing. But again, it's all focused on rentals. Now, the third thing that Trudeau mentions here is the relatively new first-time home buyer incentive that allows for the government to take a stake of equity in your home, essentially owning a portion of your home, and you have to pay that back when you sell it or at the end of 25 years. Now, this program, while it was based in some good thoughts and some good ideas, there are some problems here when it comes to how much house you can actually buy when you're using one of these programs. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. You can see a whole number of qualifications that you need to meet to be eligible for this program, but I want to show you this one right here. Your total borrowing is no more than 4 times your qualifying income, 4.5 times, if the home you are purchasing is in Toronto, Vancouver, or Victoria. Now, this puts some pretty serious limitations on who can actually access this program, especially in a number of high growth markets that we've seen over the past year where house prices have skyrocketed. Now, this program might be helpful in certain markets where the housing prices haven't really gone up all that much, but let me show you a calculation here that'll sort of show you why this program doesn't really actually help a whole lot of people. So let's go with this example and say we have a family with a net family income of $80,000 a year, right? Now, based on the guidelines here for that the government of Canada has put on this first-time homebuyer incentive, well, you can't actually buy more than 4 times the amount of your annual income in a home. So for this, that would be $160,000 would be double, and that would bring us to $320,000 as a maximum. And that calculation is just this times 4, right? That would bring us to $320,000 if you have a family income of $80,000. Now, in many markets, getting a home for under that price, or even right at that price, is just not realistic these days. So this program really only helps people who are in very specific markets with very specific levels of income where this could sort of bridge a small gap. And based on what I just showed you, along with some other reasons, well, this program isn't being used all that much, even though it's been in existence for just over 2 years now. And even myself, working as a realtor in the Greater Toronto area, I haven't ever worked with a client who has used this program or have found it helpful for their individual situation. Now, the final and the newest measure that has been implemented here, and it was actually in the budget that was released April 19th, is a 1% tax on foreign home buyers who are holding housing units that are vacant. Right? Now, we've talked about this a bunch on the channel before, but I really don't think this is going to make much of a mark on the Canadian real estate market, and let me tell you why. Now, the fourth measure and the newest measure is this 1% tax on vacant property owned by foreign investors, right? And we already talked about it on here on the channel on how I don't really think this is going to make that much of a mark, and I'll tell you why. Now, if we consider a $1 million condo in Vancouver that was previously sitting vacant, well, they'd have to pay $10,000 each year with this new tax. Now, the problem here lies in that fact that for only around $2,400 per year, they could probably hire a property manager to put a tenant in there and essentially avoid the tax. That costs them $7,600 less than subjecting themselves to this tax. So I really think most investors are just going to add this stock to the rental supply, right? Add their unit to the rental supply, but it's not really going to do anything to push down housing prices. Or these foreign investors could just see this 1% tax as a cost of doing business, which isn't all that expensive when you consider that in many cases they're using it as a hedge against inflation, which at minimum is above 2% right now, or they're just using it as a hedge against the dollar of their sovereign currency in their nation. So these are programs that sound good, and from a rental affordability perspective, they definitely are, but when it comes to the overall pricing of Canadian real estate, well, this is doing absolutely nothing to add more supply to that market. However, in the very same speech, Trudeau commits to being at the table with these individual municipalities to tackle the affordability issue for middle-class Canadians, something he doesn't mention in any of these policies, saying that Chrystia Freeland's already started meeting with these mayors to sort of talk about how they might be able to do something to help Canadians actually afford to buy a home. Now, at this very same conference, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, essentially calls out Justin Trudeau saying, hey, he's really good at announcing things, but he doesn't actually do anything. Let me show you these harsh words that he has for the Prime Minister.
We've got a lot of evidence to point out how bad things are in Canada and how Justin Trudeau has failed us. Under Justin Trudeau's leadership, Canada's house price to income ratio is the highest in the world by a large margin. If we ask the question, where have house prices risen the most in the world since the year 2000? The answer is Canada. Only a third of Canadians could afford to buy any type of house right now. Sure, I acknowledge after being pushed by municipal leaders, Justin Trudeau created the Rapid Housing Initiative, but the funding is only the bare minimum.
So the NDP leader calls out the Liberal leader saying, hey, look at how bad things have gotten over the past 5 years while the Liberals have been in power, which is a good point, but then he sort of gets into some ideas here about how he would be able to tackle this problem, but there isn't a whole lot of detail. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
We need to invest to build 500,000 affordable homes. We need to kickstart the creation or the construction of cooperative housing, of not-for-profit housing. Make sure that we are doing everything possible to look at all options, including social housing. The first-time homebuyer tax credit seems to be working. We want to double that tax credit. We also want to make mortgages more affordable by looking at different ways to lower the payments over the years. Foreign investors are looking to Canada as a safe place to park their money and using our housing market like a stock exchange. We need to tackle foreign investment in homes by putting in a national foreign home buyers tax at 20%. We also need to look at ways to reduce the immense profits that ultra-rich investors are making in the market domestically. So that means reducing the profit for property flipping.
So he packs a ton of ideas into a very small amount of time, but there isn't a whole lot of detail behind the ideas that he has. He brings up things like giving more funding for that rapid housing initiative, supplying more rental housing, right? Building 500,000 affordable homes and social housing. Again, this is stuff that will help the rental supply, not really when it comes to home ownership. One of the things that I think can boost Canadians' wealth the most as they build equity in their home. They talk about a first-time home buyer's tax being doubled. That's not a bad idea. More affordable mortgages, but he doesn't really give details on how this would work. Perhaps he's proposing extending the amortization or the amount of time that your loan is paid over so that these payments can be smaller, making it more affordable. This is something that other people have talked about before, but he doesn't really say what he's talking about. He, of course, brings up the tackling foreign investment with 20% foreign buyers tax, reducing profits of flipping, but again, no details on how exactly that would be done. And in this whole sort of speech from Jagmeet leaves me a little bit wanting. I love to see details of plans on how things would actually work, because the devil is in the details. And this is one of the most frustrating things when it comes to politics, is that oftentimes these opposition leaders will criticize the Liberal government or whatever government's in power, but not really have fully formed and detailed ideas on how they would tackle these issues. When it comes down to it, my personal opinion, which may be right and may be wrong, is that we really need to tackle this from a supply side of things, right? Supply in the market. And I don't think it can just be only focused on affordable housing. I think we need to do things to incentivize more people and more companies and individual businesses building homes that can satisfy the needs of Canadians. This means more investment also in transit, right? Extending potential rail lines out to farther and farther communities so we have more land to build on, providing more housing units for Canadians, right? We have so much room here in this country and not a lot of it is used, and I really don't see plans here that are focused on tackling this sort of idea. But that's just one guy's opinion, and I want to know what yours is. Let me know down there in the comments, what do you think of all of this? What do you think of Trudeau's plan? What do you think of Jagmeet's plan? Do you think either of these politicians would be able to do anything? Or do you think it's all more tied to interest rates and the funding from the Bank of Canada? I could talk about this forever. There's so many aspects of it, but I want to hear what you have to say. I read every comment and I try to reply to as many as I possibly can. And again, a quick reminder of the brief extension of that coupon code down in the description. One of my favorite parts of that course is all about house hacking, the way that I'm able to essentially live for free by extracting income from the property I'm living in. If you want to check that out, see if the program's a good fit for you, and I'll see you in there. But with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.